In the first volume of our series, we followed Adam and Eve through their creation, their fall into sin, and their expulsion from the garden. Now in this second episode, let's see how they fare in raising their firstborn son and the world's first murderer. Adam and Eve welcomed their firstborn son, whose name was Cain, meaning he who will acquire. And 4 years later, their second son, Abel, whose name means he who perishes or vapor. So Cain was the elder brother by 4 years. And though technically they were twins, Abel was young enough to be considered the baby of the family. What kind of relationship did these two have? Well, from the information that the Bible gives us, it appears that they had a pretty good relationship. There was no strife between them. They worked together and they brought offerings before God together. What did Cain do? Well, the Bible tells us that he grew up to become a farmer, someone who worked the soil and produced crops from the ground. What about Abel? He became a shepherd, caring for sheep and other animals in the flock. We can imagine that the boys would watch their father, Adam, work the fields and learn how to farm from him. But then Adam must have also taught them how to care for livestock, as both sons seem to have acquired those skills from him. Then one day, after some time had passed, Cain and Abel decided to bring offerings before God. Maybe this was something they had discussed while working together in the fields. Or maybe it was an idea that struck them independently. But the fact that they decided to make offerings on the same day shows that there was still no strife between them. Not yet anyway. So when the appointed time came, they each took their offerings and stood before God. Cain presented to God the fruit of the ground, grain and vegetables from the garden, and perhaps some fruit as well. We don't know exactly what he brought because the Bible doesn't say. Meanwhile, Abel took some of his sheep and offered to God the firstborn of his flock. He offered the best to God, the most beautiful lamb, probably around 1 year old, the kind of sheep that would have been most useful to raise more sheep. By giving his firstborn, Abel was giving something of great value, something that could have multiplied into a large flock. But here's the thing. The Bible tells us that God looked upon Abel's offering and it pleased him. Why? Well, the Bible says that Abel gave his gift in faith. He gave it with a pure heart. That was the difference between the two gifts. One was given with a lack of devotion, while the other was given in faith. You see, you can approach God with an offering of the finest things, but if your heart isn't right, God will reject your gift. You can approach God with nothing, but if your heart is right, God will accept your gift. So what happened after Abel's offering was accepted? Well, according to Matthew Henry's commentary, this greatly offended Cain, filling him with envy, wrath, pride, and despair. Cain felt that his gift was just as good as Abel's. After all, they both came from the same ground. How could God prefer Abel's gift over his? And so Cain's face fell, and anger and envy consumed his heart. Then the Bible says that God spoke to Cain and asked him, "Why are you angry? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted?" Here God was trying to help Cain. He was pointing out the obvious. He was showing Cain that he wasn't rejected because of who he was, but because of what he had done. But did Cain listen to God's words? Well, the Bible tells us that he didn't. Instead, it says that God cautioned him further and said, "Sin is crouching at your door. It desires to have you, but you must rule over it." So God warned him that sin was waiting for him to give in to his emotions, but that he had the power to overcome his feelings and not give in to them. However, Cain chose not to heed God's words. Instead, the Bible says that he ignored them and plotted against his brother Abel, hating him and wanting him dead. So he waited for Abel to go out to the fields with the flock, and then he went out to meet him. And once they were in the field, far away from the noise of the settlement, Cain attacked his brother and killed him. This was the first murder in human history, the first time a human being shed the blood of another human being. Now, the Bible doesn't tell us exactly how he did it. Perhaps he struck him with a rock or stabbed him with a sharp piece of wood. But whatever it was that he used, it must have been something heavy and sharp, because the Bible says that the earth drank up Abel's blood. That is, the The blood soaked into the ground and marked the land with a cry of injustice. Then the earth became a field, not a garden, a place where innocent blood was spilled. And God called out, "Where is your brother Abel?" To which Cain replied, "I don't know. Am I my brother's keeper?" Now, this is a pretty famous line, but what does it mean? It means that he was blaming Adam and Eve. He was saying that it wasn't him who should be held responsible. Rather, it was Adam and Eve who were responsible for keeping track of him. They were responsible for his actions. And in a sense, he was correct. Adam and Eve were responsible for him, just like he was responsible for Abel. But by saying this, he wasn't showing remorse. He was trying to shift the blame, and God knew that. So he confronted him with the truth and said, "What have you done? Listen, I can hear Abel's blood crying out from the ground." Then he repeated what he had said earlier. "You are only under the power of sin. If you do what is right, will you not be accepted?" As punishment for killing his brother, God cursed the ground. The ground that before had yielded fruit for Adam now wouldn't yield its crops for Cain. Whatever it was that he planted, whether grain or vegetables, it would choke and die. Cain was therefore condemned to wander restlessly over the earth, never staying long enough in one place to build a home and start a family, never being able to settle down in one place for good. Furthermore, since Cain knew that God would punish anyone who killed him, he cried out in fear, saying, "My punishment is too great to bear. Surely you have made me a restless wanderer on the earth. If anyone finds me, they will kill me." So God told him that he would be protected from anyone who wanted to kill him. But that doesn't mean that he would be safe from other dangers. God placed a protective mark on him, a mark that would ensure that no one who found him would take his life. So when someone came across him, they would think twice when they saw that mark on his forehead. And that's how Cain departed from God's presence and settled east of Eden, forever marked by his crime. And that's the end of the second episode. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, please subscribe if you haven't already. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.